I think there was
a
conversation. I have no idea.
There was a conversation
About the wage gap? About the wage gap not being real?
Is that what you wanted to talk about?
It's not something I wanted to talk about, but it's something that I definitely remembered.
Okay. Anything else, or?
So you don't believe the wage gap is real?
No, not really. I think it's a myth. It's been debunked.
Has it?
Yeah, it's been debunked.
It got thoroughly debunked
by
multiple anonymous sources.
Multiple people.
From inside the Pentagon.
Inside the Pentagon, the CIA.
Yeah.
The CIA.
It actually got rebunked and then it got debunked again.
Oh, so when they put out that,
wait, hold on just a sec.
$100. Good stuff, y'all. Wage gap is not real.
Oh wow! I don't know how quickly he typed that up. That shit was.
If the wage gap is not real, then why did he make $100 and these women just made $0?
Wow! Whoa.
Think about that.
That's crazy.
Actually, we're not getting paid.
Statistics were put out intentionally.
Sorry, say that again.
Like when they made those wage statistics that you said are debunked, since they're debunked, do you think they were put out intentionally wrong, or it was like a mistake that made them not real? Like what? Like.
From what I mean, Brian, do you want to answer first?
What the question is it mislead? What?
Like, so people believe that there's a wage gap based on these statistics, but you said it's debunked, right? So do you think those statistics were intentionally put out wrong, or it was just somehow a mistake?
Well, I mean, the wage gap essentially is, it's a very misleading number because you hear different numbers, but you hear, for example, women make 79 cents on the dollar as compared to men. Women make 83 cents on the dollar as compared to men. However, that's not how you do any sort of statistical analysis. So what the wage gap does is, there's multivariate analysis of the economy is a very complex thing. You cannot just simply, and this is what the wage gap is, it looks at all the money that women make in this country, and you compare it to all the money that the men make in this country. I think we can all agree that's a fairly oversimplified way to look at differences between the genders.
I'll come back to it. $100. Aggregate wages don't compare same pay for same work, and when you compare differences in wages for same work, it's usually less hours worked.
Yeah, so the wage gap that's often cited, again, let's say it's 79 cents to the dollar compared to men. That's taking all the money that women make, comparing it to all the money that men make. You're not accounting for type of job, type of educational achievement that they've had when it comes to degree attainment. You're not looking at hazard pay, which men typically are more likely to receive hazard pay. It's not looking at, did I already say hours worked? It's not looking at specific career fields. It's not looking at seniority. It's really not looking at anything besides really, really basic numbers.
So you think it was wrong because it was just done incorrectly? There wasn't like some sort of reason for it being like that?
I think there was probably some agenda. I think it's
pushing
some sort of I think it's pushing some sort of equity agenda versus some sort of equality, like opportunity of equality versus equity of outcome. I think it's pushing some sort of agenda there.
I was just curious as to like why it's such a commonly believed thing, and like who put it out when you're saying it's like
Well, I think it fits the narrative that men bad.
Like I was just wondering if there was like more reason for it, or it was just like done.
No, it's what Brian said. Also, men are more willing to work overnight shifts, which generally pay higher. They're working to do overtime. Also, women generally, not all women, but a lot of women will take 2 or 3 years off of their career, and they'll have a child, and then maybe they'll get into their career back.
So there just was like a lot of factors that weren't included in it.
It was lacking a lot of nuance.
Okay.
The question you need to ask yourself is not whether it exists. And by the way, so there's no pay gap or wage gap. There is an earnings gap, but the question you need to ask yourself is not whether it exists, but why it exists. And the answer is it's not sexism. There's many reasons for earnings gap. One of the big ones I forgot to mention, aside from hours worked and career field, you look at college, which actually the majority, we don't look at the gap in college where it's like 60% women who are going to college getting degrees ever since 1979. There's been more women who are going to college than men. We don't really look at that anymore. As soon as it's inequality when men are advantaged, but once women are advantaged in some paradigm, all of a sudden it's, well, now you've had equality even though it's not you're not taking into account when it comes to the earnings gap, women's own choices. So women make certain choices that lend to the supposed wage gap, or what is in actuality an earnings gap. For example, if you look at the top 10 paying fields of study in university, men predominate in the top 10. I don't know if it's either the top 5 or top 10 majors, whereas women predominate in the lowest paying majors or disciplines in universities. So, but it doesn't take into account, different hours worked by men, different types of jobs, many other factors. And I mean, we can talk about gaps though. There's all kinds of gaps. We can talk about the more likely to die on the job gap. 93% of workplace fatalities are men. So let's talk about gaps. You can make the argument that should a job where you're likely to die at, should that pay more? Well, it happens to be the case that there are more men in jobs where you're likely to be to die. You're more likely to be injured. For example, we can talk about the more likely to be electrocuted to death gap, the more likely to be crushed to death gap, the more likely to fall to their death gap, more likely to be injured on the job gap. Well, this is all predominated by men, but we don't really talk about that. So, good times. I kind of rambled there, but I don't know if you ever wanted to have a back and forth on the wage gap.
I feel like I need to do more research before I speak on the topic.
Okay.